All right, ready for another couple of questions here? This one's from Nicholas. Do you think it takes the right people to make a city life-sized, or does the life-sizedness of a city attract the right people? Is the cycle self-sustaining? First of all, absolute maximum points for using the word life-sizedness. I thought I was the only person who ever mumbled that weird word. So yeah, good question. Man, this one, I've been thinking about it. Like really thinking, like this is such a really fascinating way to look at this. And I don't know if anybody really could have the right answer. I'm going to pull in the big guns here. I got a couple of my favorite quotes about cities. And the one that popped into my mind right away when I read the question was Walt Whitman, the American writer, who wrote that a great city is that which has the greatest men and women. And I've always loved that quote for a very long time. You see cities that try to be impressive to us. You have Washington, D.C., right? All of the huge monuments. Paris as well. Massive monuments to their glorious past. And it's as though that the focus on the urban landscape for us walking about, cycling around, should be, wow, things used to be really awesome, man. Look at the size of that statue, of that arc, of that monument, that palace. I think we can all think about cities that have really put a lot of effort and money and time into building monuments, right? I think of Washington, D.C., relatively new country, the United States, but from the very beginning, they were intent on creating the mythology of greatness, the storytelling of America as a great country, and Washington, D.C. is what they ended up with. Huge monuments. You look at Paris, for example, bombastic pomposity in their monuments and the palaces and all of the, the statues even. It's amazing to walk around Paris, but is that what we're supposed to think and feel when we walk around cities like Washington or Paris? Is like, wow, what an amazing time it used to be. Look at all that old stuff that people built and spent a lot of money using incredibly cheap working class labor as well, I'm sure. But I mean, that's not really for me what a city is all about. It doesn't matter how many great famous men and women who accomplished, things like winning wars and stuff. Is basically what most monuments are celebrating, is white men who went to war and came out on top, right? I'm not meeting the top politicians, the national politicians, presidents, prime ministers, kings and queens and stuff. I'm meeting the people who live in the neighborhoods, who walk out of their door in the morning saying, this sucks, this could be better. And, I'm waiting for somebody to do it. Nobody's showing up. I'm going to do it myself, get some neighbors together. And I think for me, in this age of urbanism, as I call it, great cities are the ones with the great men and women who are taking matters into their own hands, who are sick and tired of waiting for the authorities, who want improvement now for themselves, for their children, for the people who will be living in the city in 100 years. We have this amazing window right now where we're looking at cities differently for the first time in a century, and we're realizing as regular citizens that we can make an impact, that we can make a difference. This is what the life-size city is all about. The most interesting storytelling is the citizens doing it for themselves. Sure, there can be an architect who has a vision for a better city, that's fine. But we're not talking about the people who are sitting there in their iron shirts and saying, yes, well, at my office we did this. No. We're talking about the people whose fingers are dirty, out in their neighborhoods, out in the parks, out in front of their apartments. Man, these are the greatest men and women in our cities, every city in the world. But I don't think I'm answering the question per se. I think that if you have, let's think about Copenhagen, right? Like, Copenhagen wasn't always Copenhagen, right? I mean, this last 10 years of storytelling about this city has been epic. People come from all over the world to visit and see what it's like and to feel it. But was it always this life-sized? No. We were incredibly poor for a very long time. Well into the 70s, during the oil crises, we were absolutely paralyzed in this country, not just in Copenhagen. Even in the early 90s, Copenhagen was 3 days away from going bankrupt. We had to get bailed out by the national government. We were broke. Copenhagen in the early 90s was pretty cool, but Is it as cool as it is today? Probably not. What happened? I don't know. I think the authorities gave sort of the impetus. They sort of pulled the trigger and said, we got to start maybe cleaning up and doing some cool stuff here. And I think generally if you're living with roommates or whatnot, and one of you just starts going crazy cleaning for the first time in many, many months, the other roommates are going, oh man, yeah, that's actually a good idea. You know what? I'm going to get on board that. I'll take the windows, you take the garbage out, and then, you just sort of inspire people to get the job done. I think Copenhagen was like that. I think the authorities sort of said, we could do better, and here's some things we're going to do. And the citizens went, cool, wow, let's get on board. I'm going to contribute to that as if I can. Another random example that pops into my head is the studies from the States that show that millennials want to move to cities that are cool, that have a healthy startup culture, probably have really good coffee and avocado toast, right? Joke. But also that have bicycle infrastructure. It's measured. Yeah, that city's cool. It's got all of these little things going on, so we want to move there. So I know that there are cities around the States that are trying to build this, to try and put in some bike lanes and create a little startup culture in an old industrial building to attract the millennials and anybody who's graduating from university, to get them to come to their city by putting all of these elements in place that they have read people want in a cool city. So I think that is sort of constructing a life-sizedness, as it were, and using that to attract people. And if those people do come, then it just expands. So it is kind of a self-sustaining thing. Once you start building something and doing some good things and making your city better, you're going to attract the people who think that's really, really cool. So yeah, I maybe don't even know the answer to this. I don't even know if there is an answer to this really great question. Some cities are just really awesome, and people want to go there and be a part of the awesomeness. Other cities are trying to design awesomeness, life-sizedness, and attract people because of that. And then once they get there, it hopefully continues. It becomes self-sustaining. As ever, I like to talk about how cities are going back to the future. This last century of car-centric planning was a complete brain fart, right? I mean, it destroyed so many of the things that we knew worked in cities. We just swept them under the rug and ignored them completely. Now we're lifting up the rug and pulling them out and dusting them off and going back to the future, back to a time when cities were pretty damn cool. And we were rational and intelligent about how we planned them. But, okay, sure, like cities back in the 1700s, really, in our modern perspective, would be horrible. They would smell absolutely disgusting. You could die from any number of diseases, a fast, painful death. So they weren't maybe places we'd want to live, but I think that the urban fabric was absolutely perfect. The streets were democratic space. People gathered there. We lived in small apartments. We struggled to survive in these cities, but we had all of the elements for creating life-size cities in place and in play. The urban fabric was strong and durable and sustainable. So in a way, every city used to be life-sized, and I think that every city can be life-sized again. It's an uphill battle, but as we're showing with the Life Size City series, people around the world are taking charge. We're going to get there.